Arc 5, Chapter 69, A Repulsive Dinner Banquet. Everyone laid their eyes on the young girl who snorted her nose as her dress's hem danced in the breeze. The girl, Beatrice, looked around with her eyes, observing the situation. In this large plaza of the waterway street, present was the heavily scarred gluttony, Lai Kitos, and Otto and the rest opposing him. Looking at Otto and Felt and the others, Beatrice blatantly let out a tired sigh.
Those are rather pitifully poor faces, I suppose.
Everyone was too worn out to argue back Beatrice's comments, who let out a sigh. However, Beatrice partaking in the fight would surely be a turning point in this progressively worsening battle. Naturally, feelings of relief were given rise to within Otto's chest. As soon as he was about to call her name, Otto shut his mouth. Kitos was an existence who ate names. He had just used the ploy of having Felt and the others not call his name by requesting them. There was no way he could go against that himself. Kitos' attitude for Otto, who was hiding the name, he was clearly irritated by him being an obstruction to his meal. In other words, Kitos, in order to eat his opponent's name, must know their name. Henceforth, he could not be allowed to perceive Beatrice's name. He positioned his hand and suppressed his words. However, Otto's such forethought ended being futile. For some reason...
Beatrice-sama! What are you doing outdoors?
Because that was what Kitos articulated, leaning his neck forward and eyes fixed on Beatrice. Continuing to observe Beatrice, Gluttony continued his mysterious words.
Even after disliking going outside so much, aside from the times of meals or when accompanied by the Great Spirit, Sama, so there were some exceptions.
Kitos continued his words against the quiet Beatrice. Those seemed like words suggesting closeness, which would be inaccurate to say, but they were unquestionably words of a person having a sense of distance and relationship in the past.
That means he's your acquaintance from the past. Beatrice...
The relationship of the past between Kitos and Beatrice. Losing understanding before being able to call her name, Otto's throat choked midway. This time he unconsciously glanced at Beatrice's face. Biting her lips, and fury swirling in her large, round eyes, was Beatrice. It had been rare for this spirit girl to show rage. In front of the astonished Otto, Beatrice inhaled very deeply and scowled at Kitos.
Your trick has been understood, in fact. So that's how it is, I suppose.
Muttered Beatrice in a deep and heavy voice. Her voice was not conveying hostility, but instead it was one suppressing her own emotions. Hiding her rage from showing on her face, Beatrice locked her gaze into the interior of Kitos' corrupted and muddy eyes, and distorted her lips due to the revulsion, which resulted from what she had laid her eyes upon. And...
You. How many people will you stockpile within yourself until you grow sick of it, in fact?
Who knows? But the quantity we eat is still better than compared to Roy. Roy is bizarre eating, so he eats anything. But since we select carefully, the quantities are different. We consider the quality of the lives we eat, and that's what conflicts us with Roy.
Eating names and memories. Stating it to be his meal was Kitos. Naming himself gourmet and calling someone close to him bizarre eating had a peculiar aesthetic sense, both of which were things Otto could never comprehend. And what Otto could not come to understand was also Beatrice's attitude at that moment. The young girl's revulsion did not seem to result from simply evaluating the confronting Kitos. It appeared to stem differently from a negative conception of a different root. Perhaps that linked to Kitos treating Beatrice like an existence he already knew. And, thinking that far, Otto noticed the possible reason as to why Kitos unilaterally knew Beatrice.
It can't be.
Kitos' combat power lay in a territory which could be entered by only those who had trained tough and long. Otto had made a hypothesis based on Dynas's factual remarks.
I anticipated the experiences of the body of an opponent whose name and memory had been eaten to be taken over, but your unnamed martial arts and dagger skills, attaining such an extreme level of prowess in them at your age will be difficult. If that's how it is, then...
Even the skills of an eaten opponent would serve as food for him. If that were the case, then it became conceivable how Kitos had managed to learn abilities rivaling that of a master martial artist in a great number of spheres. If that hypothesis was correct, not just correct, but held further meaning to it.
However, what if what is taken over is not just experiences of the body?
It meant that it was something which was even further vicious, different from the threat of fighting strength. After all, Kitos had said that he was looking for the one whose speech had echoed across the city. That person who was weak and fragile, unable to help anything unless someone stood by his side and supported him. You could sense that and sympathize with that by being with the character of Natsuki Subaru for a long time. That youth had that mysterious part of him, which made those around him think this. However, those thoughts were that of someone who had dealt affectionately with him. The fact that he was aware of Subaru's brittle strength and weak courage was the proof that he had been close to him. And if that proof was something which had been stolen by gluttony, at this time, only one possible candidate, a single young girl, came to mind. Finally, Otto arrived at the same revulsion which Beatrice was feeling. Subjected to the changed color in Otto's eyes glaring directly at him, Kitos smiled and unveiled his fangs.
The handmaid of the household of Margrave Roswell Elmathers! Wait, what's wrong?
Oscillating his neck while pronouncing that, Kitos widened his arms. On his scarred body, he caressed a single white scar lovingly. That scar, suspended on his shoulder, looked like it had received a sharp iron picket and was painful to even look at.
Now just a lone loved person. One self-beloved person who will be a hero someday. Natsuki Subaru supporter, Rem. Was it? Let us meet him. That beloved hero, Sama. Our hero must have come here to cast his judgment upon us till all the way here.
Stretching out his tongue, licking that wound, Kitos guffawed. Without thinking, Otto's blood rose up to his head as he gnashed his teeth as they made a crackling sound. He was filled with rage enough that he wanted to punch him. Gluttony's attitude, tone, smile, everything was ridiculing the feelings of that lone young girl. Without knowing how much that young girl must have had pleaded for returning safely, now she was only being trampled upon by mockery and scorn. That was what had been set ablaze within Otto's heart. This gluttony was an opponent who could never be forgiven.
Beatrice, son?
Beatrice stepped lightly and stood in front of Otto, who was counting the number of magic stones left in his sleeves with his finger. Otto was unable to understand why she had shifted towards him, and...
I'll correct my first words, I suppose. Good job calling Betty here, in fact. Only he is someone Subaru must not meet, I suppose. If Subaru meets him, he'll be hurt. Certainly to the point that wound will never heal. That's why.
Right. We'll stop him here, by just ourselves.
Pronouncing the end of Beatrice's words, Otto declared. Though Beatrice did not turn back, her stance made it clear that she agreed. She was Subaru's partner, who committed himself to oneself and others. Otto painfully understood how unpleasant it would be for him if the viciousness in front of his eyes was to get close to him.
Wait! I'm telling you to wait!
And the one calling out to the two with a revitalized desire for taking their opponent down was not Kitos. It was Felt, who had been quietly listening to the dialogue until now beside Otto. She gripped her package and pointed it towards Beatrice.
I heard you talk like some big shot, but what can this little girl do in the first place? Oh, I heard you were a companion with that Nichan.
I see. First, explaining that would be a bit tricky.
Felt suggested her own doubts, to which Otto was unable to give a proper explanation. She possibly already knew about Beatrice being a spirit and being in a contract with Subaru, since that was common knowledge. It was also true that Beatrice's battle strength was uncertain in Subaru's absence.
A pipsqueak should not call others little girls, in fact. If you have the free time to worry about Betty's ability, you should better use it for worrying about that futureless deficient body, I suppose.
Quite a harsh brat you are. Hey, let me tell you, I've been eating and sleeping properly now, so both my back and my chest are growing. You should be the one worrying over your future.
Unfortunately, Betty's appearance is set firm to this design, so,
A conversation befitting the situation started, but Beatrice put a halt to it by pausing her words. What her eyes had caught onto was the slender package in Felt's hands. Felt's so-called trump card was a magic tool, but Beatrice made a surprised expression upon laying her eyes on it.
No way. Is that Meteor, I suppose?
Meteor?
Mother, a revered magician from a long time ago, used it to pester the dragon, in fact. Its whereabouts were supposed to be unknown, but this is fate, I suppose.
Felt found Beatrice's explanation, who had corrected a crucial part of it, debatable. But from Otto's point of view, stating that the mother Beatrice had mentioned and corrected later on was a witch who had disappeared from legends would make for a truly outrageous claim. He still held his own doubts he wanted to ask about, but if the witch had truly used it to pester the dragon, the reliability of its potential was high.
I'd heard of its convolution in usage, but what can we expect in terms of strength?
It's a staff which boasts an anecdote of having made the dragon halfway cry, in fact. It's guaranteed, I suppose.
Her claim was still difficult to believe. However, she had conveyed the authenticity of the weapon. Though Otto had been swayed by Beatrice's words, Felt was yet unconvinced.
I'll teach you about the hell that you're blabbering about later. Rather than that, this little...
Your conscience cannot rise above that level, in fact. But your concern is futile, I suppose. After all,
Huh?
the attack has already been set up.
In front of Felt, who tilted her neck, Beatrice sketched an enchanting smile upon her face. Her softly upraised right hand pointed towards Kitos, and the throats of everyone were subsequently frozen. Violet crystals crystallized and surrounded Kitos' environs.
Beatrice is so merciless!
Just holding back in mercy are things which do not exist anywhere in this world for you, I suppose.
Elminia, a rare offensive magic even within yin magic, was the reason behind him showing his fangs. The moment Kitos let out his complaint, the violet crystals did a boisterous dance and aimed and rushed at his petite body. The tough and pointed attack struck the thin body standing upright. The crystals shattered, the stone pavement fissured, and smoke was given rise to. This disastrous scene in this huge open plaza had proved her might.
Well, what do you think, I suppose?
Showing her magical power, Beatrice turned to Felt with a victorious expression. Though it was an immature gesture for a 400-year-old great spirit, Felt was too speechless to point anything like that out.
Well, not so bad, I guess.
However, despite her speechlessness, Felt refused to admit her loss and mistakes.
Your voice is trembling, Feltoju-sama.
That goes for you too. Stop saying idiotic nonsense and keep looking ahead.
Felt yelled at Gaston, whose voice was trembling, in order to hide the trembling of her own voice. But not all that she said was deceptive. After all, the figure of the defenseless Kitos, who should have received Beatrice's magical attack and gotten himself caught up in its subsequent explosion, was not present where he should have been.
He's coming!
Dynas shouted, and everyone raised their eyes and looked in the direction he had his eyes fixed upon. There present was the form of Gluttony, with all 4 of his limbs on the ground, moving like a spider. Gluttony smiled, displaying his fangs, as blood streamed down from his eyes.
As expected of Beatrice-sama! How nice, so nice, quite nice, perhaps it is nice! Certainly it is nice! Isn't it nice? Surely it's nice! As it is surely nice!
Shaking his head about, disheveling his hair, Kitos leapt from the ground and pounced, charging ahead once again.
5 shots left.
In response to his charge, Otto heard Beatrice mutter something unsettling whilst licking her lips. The moment El Minya was used, and the attack commenced upon Kitos, Beatrice felt a large magic stone shatter in her pocket. The number of magic stones now left with her were 6. In terms of Beatrice's usage, only 5 could be deployed in the battle. During the current battle in the city, there had been the preliminary encounter with the Sin Archbishops of Wrath and Greed, and the subsequent incidental fight against them in the square. As a result of that battle, Beatrice had spent her mana for healing Subaru and the people of the city, to the point that it disrupted her physical capabilities. The spirit Beatrice was an artificial spirit created by the witch, Echidna. Her strength was far greater than that of normal spirits, but in return for that, she had some troublesome downsides. Even amongst them, her greatest weakness would perhaps be that the only way she could recover the mana she lost was by receiving it through her contractor, the mana present in the atmosphere, or the mana offered to her by humans other than her contractor. None of them could Beatrice reduce into her own strength. Consequently, the only means she had to refill her exhausted mana was to take the time of receiving it from Subaru. Her being mobile right now was the result of a card being played which normally could not be put to use. As of this situation, Beatrice held 7 magic stones. A large magic stone was one that had had mana stockpiled within it over several years. Among them, 1 had already been shattered, and only 6 of them were left now. They had been given to Beatrice, who had plunged into a deep slumber, by Kiritaka, who was aware of the progression in this large plaza, and his actions were for the purpose of providing aid to them.
Please, I request this of you from the bottom of my heart, Great Spirit-sama. Please lend me your strength in protecting this city. In this city, there are those whom I love.
All messed up and almost crying, but detachedly pleading to her, was Kiritaka. Beatrice responded with no choice to Kiritaka, who had used an immeasurably priceless magic stone with no second thoughts in order to awaken from her slumber. If she were to say the truth, Beatrice wanted to hurriedly reach where Subaru was. The city situation had revolved, and Subaru, too, was under threat. Without her by his side, Subaru was a hopelessly worrying guy, after all. That's why, now that herself was awake, she would dedicate herself to Subaru.
Stupid, I suppose. No. Stupid, in fact.
Beatrice gave up on that desire of hers once she felt the guilt after realizing her indulgence under the name of concern. If Subaru had chosen to fight, that too without her presence, then that meant he had a way to fight without her. Subaru did not overestimate himself. Rather, he tended to underestimate himself too much. He would not recklessly get into a confrontation with an opponent he could not win against. And if he could win against the opponent without using Beatrice, he would somehow or other wake her up. That was why, in this battle, Subaru did not need herself, who had been left alone. That was why, once Subaru had returned after the battle, she must also have a victorious record under her belt so that she could match up to him. For Beatrice, who now stood as backup, Kiritaka had offered up 7 large magic stones. Unable to use the mana from her surroundings, Beatrice now was utilizing the mana of the magic stones like an inefficient conductor as a last resort. In her dress's pocket, the 7 magic stones were capable of miracles, but their potential was now being wasted on usage of mere magic. One would normally believe that their strength could be used to invoke not 10, but even 1,000 magic moves. However, though there were no limitations to the extent of the magic, but no matter how low scale the magic was, the magic stone would shatter at a single invocation. As one of the 6 needed to be reserved, only 5 could be utilized. In other words, she must wrap it up in 5 moves.
The reunion with Bubby will have to wait, I suppose. Instead of that, you will be seeing hell, in fact.
One of the large magic stones Kiritaka had given to Beatrice was originally intended to be occupied by Puck. That was the original purpose of their trip, but now, that being shattered for the purpose of battle was nothing but ironic.
We're tired of seeing else. After all, the ones that got eaten by us, every one of them tasted that in the end.
Shouting that, Kitos leapt towards them. His movement was casual, but his cutting gaze was utmost cautious regarding Beatrice. He was unaware of the fact that Beatrice would run out of gas after 5 moves, that she would run out of mana. In order to give him that impression, she had commenced with an attack of a powerful range in exchange of 1 magic stone. That strategy was the best faculty available, and it had passed the exam. Beatrice raised up her left hand and pointed its palm towards the airborne Kitos.
Ow! Minya!
Just kidding, in fact.
At that moment, expecting the extremely high-level magic, Kitos toughened up his body. In front of him, Beatrice stuck out her tongue and flew backwards. At that point, Gaston and Dynas plunged onto the curled-up Kitos.
Oh! Eat this too!
The shouting 2 men launched their counterattack upon Kitos with 2 blades and a fist. The weighty and sharp hit struck Gluttony, but Kitos dodged it with preeminent body handling, and in reverse, turned his own dagger towards the dominated 2. The edge of the oscillating steel took a path which aimed straight for Dynas's neck.
It's dangerous! Sorry!
Gaston obstructed into the dagger's path, shielding Dynas and taking the strike himself. A wooden report echoed, and the dagger's power was weakened, but Gaston, while drawing back, coughed violently, and red blood seeped out of those lips. It was the limit of his mana-utilizing battle ability, otherwise called flow method. Bearing his tough body, Gaston's way of fighting against blades and blows was his skill known as flow method, an alternate method of the utilization of mana, which was otherwise used for magic. It was a skill involving far less talent than compared to magic. Only training and the amount of training mattered, and the user was required to shed blood for its usage.
But it seems he pushed himself far too much, in fact.
In Beatrice's eyes, Gaston's facets and talents were nothing beyond mediocrity. Him being able to somehow or the other, take the Sin Archbishop's spears with his partial flow method could only be because Kitos had been going very easy on Gaston.
Take this!
Kneeling down, he kicked right into Gaston's jaw in an upward direction. Bleeding from his nose and collapsing down, immobile, the giant was now unable to battle. With this, their war potential had been reduced by one more.
You really worked hard, Gaston! Pretty bravely you fought! You worked and you worked, but you failed! We'll evaluate such a guy to be worthy!
You bastard!
Seeing the form of Kitos mocking Gaston, Felt's blood rose up to her head, and she aimed the meteor she held in her hand straight for his head. If it was put to use the way it should rightfully be, its might was surely that one would expect of a witch. But if it were to be used as a mere slapstick, it could not possibly utilize its complete potential.
Uh-oh! Jeez, Felt-chan! You're doing it!
Shut up! Get away, you shit!
While scuffling to handle the cane, Felt continued to use her physical abilities to try and land a sharp blow upon Kitos. Kitos dodged all of it, with just the elegant handling of his feet, as if doing a magnificent dance. The meteor had indeed come in contact with Gluttony's hair, but it was not sufficient enough to cause any damage to him. There was an overwhelming gap of skill between them. He was completely treating her as a plaything.
You! Get away now, I suppose! Our merchant has already recovered the big guy, in fact!
Do you think I came here to just mislead?
The difference in their physical capabilities was evident, and it was certain that she would lose if she were counterattacked. While Felt attacked Kitos, Otto hurriedly drew the fainted Gaston out of the theater. Dynas, too, confirmed the texture of his two katanas, and was searching for a gap to break into Felt and Kitos' fight, but there was no certain opportunity. Even if an alteration arose, Kitos would fill in that gap completely. The approach of watching vigilantly for an opportunity and awaiting an alteration signaled to them the reality that Gluttony, who was outnumbered and should have been at a disadvantage, was the one ruling this place.
What? What is this? What is this? What could it be? Why could it be? What could it perhaps be? Even after jumping in for helping, will Felt-chan abandon this so pathetically?
So noisy! You too, you bastard! Just stay put and get hit!
Is that so? But we're getting bored now!
Kya!
As Felt yelled while swinging the meteor, at that moment, Kitos stepped ahead. The distance between the two of them became 0, and Gluttony's palm caressed Felt's svelte chest. At that moment, the shock impacted the young girl's body and threw her backwards gently, and giving rise to a high-pitched shriek, Felt rolled down the stone pavement. The attack had strength enough to simply throw her body backwards, but that was not the problem here.
Oh crap! She's been directly touched!
Otto raised his voice, seeing the coughing Felt, who had received the impact on her chest. Seeing the agony on his face, Beatrice understood the reason for his concern. Gluttony's meal had been prepared.
Felt-chan! Let's eat!
Following the unknown principle, Kitos' left hand, which had touched Felt, had its palm tickled by his elongated tongue. As if there was something vital, like the young girl named Felt, present on it. Placing it on his tongue as if loving it, caressing its rough texture, tasting each and every part of it as if harvesting it, and dropping it down to his breadbasket and mercilessly digesting it. At the moment that was completed, Gluttony's meal came to an end, and the name settled within the blasphemer, and All traces of the young girl named Felt disappeared from the world.
Huh? What is it, you bastard? Just how rude can this guy get?
Felt, shaking her head, was looking at Kitos, knelt down and vomiting. Of course, her existence had not disappeared. She only tilted her neck in rage. That was the moment when Gluttony's meal had failed unsightly.